43.
By the way, one of the chat room from Jake and Saeed, they asked me about any updates on Chapter 2 expansion. It's been very quiet, and it's been very quiet because nothing's happened yet with the Pac-12 and what they need with the new network, a new TV deal. That kind of has put things in limbo because that is when you can react to that because that kind of then sets the table, and then you want more than that. And so it's kind of negotiations there. And the other part of it is the fact that I had mentioned that if, in fact, they were going to start Chapter 2, the earliest would be, but they would want it to be by the end of November. It's the 16th. And so it's been quiet so far. But I still think the Pac-12 TV deal could then start in motion Chapter 2.
I know we have John, but, yeah, that's something that for anybody who's just tuning in, I mean, the Pac-12 part of this is like the key is this, one of the linchpins, I guess you would say, into moving into that next wave. So, like, until that gets done, that kind of puts other things in limbo. But also there was a story earlier today about CBS and their future and what they're going to do to replace the SEC. And I've wondered about that. We've talked about that. Like, they'd given no indication of how they were going to replace Southeastern Conference football. But then there was a report today that, they're looking at the Pac-12. They're looking at the Big Ten as well, and there was no mention of the Big 12 that I saw, but that obviously would be along those lines. So if the Pac-12 got some massive deal from CBS or something, I mean, that could change what the Big 12 is then looking at, so on and so forth, domino effect, and hopefully that makes sense.
All right, we're now joined by the Hall of Famer himself and John McClain, Houston Chronicle, Waco native, went to Baylor. Joins us on Sikkim 365 and 365 Sports. John, I know that parity is a big deal in the NFL, but I want to get to the elite teams. We've seen all of them with a just throw up on themselves type game. Give the teams who beat them a lot of credit. Tampa Bay losing to Washington, Cowboys in Denver, among others. Is that just because there are no great teams, or is that just normal and I just feel like it's different?
Right now, there's no great teams. If you lose your quarterback, like Cleveland did, like Green Bay did, injuries tell the tale usually, especially depending on who it is, how long they're out, and who they play. That's paramount every year, especially when it comes down to the crunch time of November and December, and this year for 2 weeks in January. But there's not one great team. Hopefully Kyler Murray can get back to Arizona, and the Cardinals can pick up where they left off when he was there. One team that we probably can count out, we can count them out as being elite, is the Rams. They could whip up on the Lions and Texans in back-to-back weeks. Then they get beat up physically by the Titans and the 49ers. The Packers have lost one game when Aaron Rodgers is healthy. And then there's teams that are coming on like New England. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender because of a rookie quarterback, even though he's playing well. But of all the games I saw this past weekend, what Patrick Mahomes did to the Raiders in a very big AFC West game, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. That is the Patrick Mahomes that we've been expecting, and now they are finally back in first place, and I do not expect them to relinquish it. By the way, I just got a tip here. Dave Aranda is a candidate for the Little Brothers of the Poor High School down south of Houston.
Oh man, they're a juggernaut, John. That's gonna be tough.
John McClain, stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
John, what did you think of that Oklahoma game and the physical dominance that Baylor exerted over them?
It just made me more upset about TCU. Why couldn't Gary Patterson have waited a week to get fired and then let him inspire the Frogs to beat the Cowboys instead of Baylor? I thought, my goodness, Chandler Morris is going to pick Oklahoma State apart. He was awful. But, hey, it is what it is. Bouncing back, beating up the Sooners. Watching Lincoln Riley whine and cry into that game was great. And I'm so happy for Baylor. I hope they win out. Hope they don't have a letdown at K-State. Think they'll beat Tech. But, by the way, have y'all heard what they're calling Kansas?
No.
The bowl assassin.
The bowl assassin.
Oh, my goodness.
That's good. That's
Bingo.
really good.
Yep.
That's really good. John, I'll stick with Baylor. I mean, that was such a great atmosphere on Saturday. Just the game itself was a fun watch as well, unless you were an OU fan ultimately. But Just what have you – I mean, you've talked about Dave Aranda a lot, but just what have you made of just the steps that you've seen taken this year, the type of physicality they play with, the type of clarity they have offensively this year? They have an identity. Just what have you made of the night and day difference from obviously what was a not normal season last year?
It starts up front on both sides of the ball. They used to get battered on the offensive line, something terrible. I remember the West Virginia game last year, and the Sims brothers just assaulted them up front. Nobody beats them up anymore. The defensive line is so much better. There's got to be one person, not two people, but one person had to said, hey, what about moving Smith back to running back? Somebody had to come up with that idea that others may have said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's take it today. And Aranda signed off on it. I saw a ranking on Mel Kiper last week that has Abram Smith as a fullback. I'm thinking, if you watch that game, that guy's not a fullback. That guy's a running back, and he is a physical, punishing running back whose stock is just going to continue to climb. And watching them beat OU it reminded me of the RG3 days. And of that game, which is still one of the greatest in Baylor history. And this one is going to be right up there. And watching them talk about how Dave Aranda has Lincoln Riley's number. And I'm sure Riley would be happy to kick in some of his multi-million-dollar contract to get Aranda one of those jobs at Washington, USC, LSU, just to get him out of the conference.
One of the things.
Well, hey, wait a minute. I take that back. No, Lincoln Riley can't get to the SEC quick enough. And I'll tell you something else. This has been making the rounds. The school that is happiest in the SEC that Texas know you are coming, Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
There's some good memes on Vandy and them welcoming in those two for sure coming out of this weekend.
On the Abram Smith story, the word that I'm getting, and it was kind of just as they were going through the early offseason, John Lovett had transferred, and they wanted to go to the wide zone. They had hired Grimes and then eventually Mateos, and they were trying to find out who was going to be that guy. And I don't know if it was one. I think Dave Aranda asked it or Jeff Grimes asked it. The bottom line is David Wetzel, Juice Johnson, Joey McGuire. He had played against him when he was at Abilene High, and Joey was at Cedar Hill. They all kind of pretty much in unison mentioned that, hey, we got a guy that played running back. But Dave Aranda, I believe, is the one that broached the topic first.
Well, good, because it was one of the best moves I've ever seen in Baylor history, and I go back to 1960 and hope they can keep it up. I can't wait to see how he gets evaluated when the NFL starts doing its legitimate evaluations and they start watching the tape and the way he breaks tackles, runs over people, and still makes a lot of long runs.
Mm-hmm. John, a couple of NFL questions. If you were the Rams, would you have brought Odell Beckham Jr. in, given the fact that he's gone from Cleveland because of chemistry issues?
Well, he's gone from Cleveland because he was hurt for 2 years and he didn't produce. And it's a rental. It's like a baseball deal at the trade deadline in baseball where they get them for the rest of the year. And the Rams, they're looking to add weapons of experience. They're all in on trying to get to the Super Bowl in their own home stadium and be the second team in a row to do that after it's never been done before. So I have no problem with it. And it's not fair to judge him after a short period like that. It's going to be judged over the rest of the season. But, man, oh, man, watching Matthew Stafford, what's happened to him the last two games, nobody is mentioning Stafford and MVP in the same sentence anymore.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
There you go. John McClain, the up and down roller coaster of the emotions. His Twitter feed, watching him watch Baylor or covering the Texans is something that is it's worth the follow.
Well, maybe next time you talk to Aranda, you can ask him for the real story of how the Smith thing came up, if it was him specifically or whatever. Because he's touched on it a little bit, but he's never, I don't think, ever gotten into like that specific of a.
I have done. I talked to Juice Johnson about that once, and I remember Juice was like, it was kind of like just maybe a coaches meeting.
Yeah.
And David Wetzel's name popped up, and Joey McGuire, who had again faced him in high school. But as far as did someone go, hey, by the way, I believe Dave Aranda is the one that said it, and I'm sure that Grimes and Mateos and all the other ones I mentioned, Juice Johnson, said, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't immediate either. But we saw him in the spring game. There was this massive hole on a zone, a wide zone, and all of a sudden you saw this kid running right through it, like the way you're supposed to. And I was like, man, it looks good. It wasn't easy, but it has turned out to be a phenomenal move, no question.
Well, if he keeps pace with what he's doing right now, he's going to have this single-season rushing record at the end of the year. He's going to break Terrence Ganaway's record. He's on pace to do that. Obviously, if he has like a bad game coming up and only got like 45 yards or something, that would kind of crush those hopes. But, given if he goes out these next – we know they have 3 games. They might even have 4. But if he goes out there and does what he's been doing, then he's probably going to walk away as the single-season rushing record holder, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.